On tonight's summary of the Israel-Hamas War, day 152. Hostage negotiations are at a breaking point. Both Israel and Hamas maintain that they will not compromise any further. Negotiators have resorted to asking the sides to just accept a truce of a few days at this point. Amir al-Adini, al-Qassam senior figure who was in charge of rocket launching from the central parts of the Gaza Strip, was assassinated today in the al-Nusayrat refugee camp. The humanitarian situation and hunger in the Gaza Strip is worsening. Between 18 to 20 people, including babies, have died thus far from malnutrition and dehydration in the northern parts of the Strip. First people are killed in a Houthi maritime attack. 2 people died on a freighter ship that the Houthis fired upon. The crew reportedly abandoned ship and the ship may be sinking. Israel's Minister Gantz met with the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and heard that the United Kingdom is losing patience with the situation. Hello everyone, I'm Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute fellow at the University of California, Irvine. Here I bring you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas War. It's currently the evening of March 6, 2024 in the United States, the morning of March 7, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, the negotiations appear to be at a breaking point, with each side stating that they are steadfast in their demands and are not going to budge any further. One of the main points of contention right now revolves around the return of Palestinian civilians to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. The Wall Street Journal today quoted Egyptian sources stating that while Israel has agreed to allow women, children, and elderly Palestinians to return to the north, Hamas is demanding complete freedom of movement and to allow families to travel together. According to the reports, Israel is concerned that this will allow Hamas to rebuild and regain its strength and also rearm the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. Both sides have stated that they are not going to move on their position. Hamas reportedly intended on walking out of negotiations in Cairo already yesterday. It's important to note that Israel has not even sent delegates to these negotiations. Hamas is currently discussing with Egypt, who then discusses with Israel. However, Egyptian intelligence minister Abbas Kamel convinced the delegation to stay for one more day. Hamas has meanwhile stated that Israel has not responded to its demands, including complete ceasefire, IDF withdrawal and redeployment, and freedom of movement in the Strip, and that this is the reason that Hamas is not responding with a formula for prisoner exchange. The group said that it will not move forward in negotiations unless Israel completely accepts its different demands. Some Hamas sources stated that Israel offered to redeploy the IDF towards the eastern parts of the Gaza Strip, but that Hamas does not accept this and is insisting on a clear mapping for the ceasefire lines, and that more importantly, it insists on incorporating the final ceasefire between the sides, and that this is an unconditional demand of the group. All this to say that these are positions that Hamas has been stating from the beginning of the negotiations in this round. Israel and seemingly the United States and Qatar and Egypt were hoping that Hamas would negotiate them and that the sides could meet in the middle. However, thus far, nothing has actually moved. As things appear completely stalled, in a different report in the Wall Street Journal was stated today that negotiators, Qatar, Egypt, and the United States, proposed to Israel and Hamas to declare a very short several-day truce as a trust-building mechanism in order to show both each side that the other one is serious about this. However, that some of the negotiators also feel, like Israel, that Hamas has decided it would rather see escalations during Ramadan. Meanwhile, in the Jordanian newspaper Al Ra'i al-Yawm, there was a report that Khalil al-Haya, who's a deputy of Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, submitted to the Egyptian intelligence minister Abbas Kamel Hamas's final position on the negotiations, which involve a range of facets, demands, lists of the heaviest prisoners to be released, and lots of other things. However, I will say that since this is unconfirmed, it was not published anywhere else, and Hamas itself did not comment about this, I'm not going to bring in the entire list. It is very long. I'll report about this if and when this does materialize. Moving on to the Gaza Strip, there were no rockets or mortars sent from the Gaza Strip towards Israel in the last 24 hours. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, there were more bombings reported in the Jabalia refugee camp. The IDF stated that it is attacking targets belonging to Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, including hideout apartments, weapons warehouses, launching sites, and tunnel entrances in the area. At the same time, local sources in Gaza reported that in an attack targeting the Al-Salah mosque in Jabalia refugee camp, 2 girls and an adult were killed at the entrance to the mosque. Other bombings were reported in the Beit Hanun area. The IDF reported that 2 Nukhba platoon commanders were killed, stating that it is possible that they participated in the October 7th attack as well. In the central part of the Gaza Strip, Amir Atiyah Darwish al-Adini, who is a senior figure in the al-Qassam Brigades and the person in charge of the group's rocket fire in the central part of the Gaza Strip, was assassinated today. Al-Adini was a central figure in developing and launching sites and was in charge of the rocket fire for over a decade. In addition, he played a critical role in the massive rocket launching during the October 7th attack and in providing cover as the hostages were being taken. He was reportedly killed in an airstrike in the central camps in the Gaza Strip. Some reports stated this was in Deir al-Balah, others stated possibly Nuseirat refugee camp. Unclear where this exactly happened. In a different report, in the Nuseirat refugee camp, there was an attack that targeted a house that reportedly belongs to one of Yahya Sinwar's brothers, Zakaria Sinwar. This brother is a lecturer in the Islamic University in Gaza with a specialty in Zionist history. According to reports, several people were killed in this attack. It was not reported if Zakaria Sinwar actually plays a role in Hamas, nor if he was the target of the attack specifically, or if he was killed. In the southern parts of the Gaza Strip in Hanun, that's where the bulk of the fighting still remains, substantial gun battles were reported throughout the day in the Hamid city area as the IDF continues its operations in that region. RPGs were launched towards IDF units as they moved in, with some very intensive gun battles reported. The al-Quds brigades of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad reported attacking IDF soldiers and vehicles with mortars in several different locations. In other news in this region, the IDF reported that the Commando 98 Brigade unit carried out a secret raid in the Hamid Towers, which is in the heart of Hamid City, taking them over and carrying out substantial amounts of arrests. Major weaponry was found in the towers, including weapons, grenades, military vests, explosives, and military diving equipment as well. Thus far, the IDF is reporting that in the Hamid City incursion, over 250 Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad operatives were arrested. Regarding casualties in the last 24 hours, the IDF is reporting that one soldier was killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of IDF soldiers killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began to 247. 1,467 IDF soldiers have been injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip is reporting that 86 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 30,717. 72,156 Palestinians have been injured in the Gaza Strip since the war began, and there are still several thousand that are buried under the rubble and presumed dead. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip reported that several more people have died from malnutrition and dehydration in the northern parts of the Strip, bringing the number of people who have died from those conditions to, I'll say, between 18 and 20, because the Palestinian Health Ministry put out two different reports. One of them stated the total number was 18, one of them stated it was 20. It was unclear which one was the later one, so right now I'll say the number is between 18 and 20. Meanwhile, UNFPA, that's the United Nations Population Fund, reported that the malnutrition conditions and the rates among pregnant and breastfeeding women in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip have significantly increased in the last weeks, causing serious health risks for mothers and newborns. Other news relating to humanitarian situations: aid paradropping missions were carried out today by Egypt and the United Arab Emirates. There were no reports as to how much aid was dropped, as well as where it was dropped throughout the Gaza Strip. In the past, there have been several paradropping missions in the northern parts of the Strip. However, some of them are limited to the central and the southern parts. Hamas has said that all the paradroppings have been in the southern parts. There was no report about what happened today. In other news, a report came out today that the IDF has been negotiating with international organizations to begin allowing aid to enter the Gaza Strip through a maritime corridor. This is supposed to begin already next week, where aid that will be funded by the United Arab Emirates will be loaded in Cyprus and inspected by Israeli officials. After that, the World Central Kitchen will unload the aid on flotillas into a port in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, which will presumably be under IDF auspices. In the last several days, the United States has repeatedly stated that it is working on developing this maritime corridor. According to Israel, this is a favored option as opposed to paradropping for a lot of different reasons, among others because it will allow actually some control over where the aid is distributed, as opposed to these random paradroppings, which are then seeing Gazans trying to flee from place to place in order to get some of the aid. I've been asked several times what has caused the spiraling of the crisis in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, so I will say that I'm going to put out a short video about that in the coming days, explaining, in addition to all the facets of the war, what has specifically happened in the last 2 to 3 weeks to bring about this current acute crisis. Moving on to the West Bank, a 14-year-old Palestinian carried out a stabbing attack in Jerusalem today. A 64-year-old Israeli was stabbed in the back of the Neve Yaakov area and was injured. The attacker was arrested. Regarding IDF activity, substantial IDF activity was reported in the areas of Hebron, with many Palestinians reportedly being taken for questioning and some arrested. There were also some confrontations that were reported there. Other IDF activity was reported in the areas of Kilkilia, Tulkarem, Ramallah, and El Bire. A total of 17 Palestinians reported arrested in the West Bank in the last 24 hours, according to the IDF figures. According to Palestinian figures, the total of Palestinians arrested in the last 24 hours was 25. Other news, the High Planning Authority within Israel's civil administration, that is the IDF body that is in charge of civil matters in the West Bank, authorized today the development of nearly 3,500 housing units in West Bank settlements. 694 of these received final approval in the settlement of Efrat, whereas 2,732 are going to be advanced, most of these in Ma'ale Domim, and some of these in the settlement of Kidar. After one of the Palestinian terror attacks last month, political elements, chief among them Israel's finance minister Bezalel Smotrich, and it's important to note that Bezalel Smotrich is not only the finance minister, he's also a minister in Israel's security establishment in charge of the civil administration, stated that such housing units would be developed as a, quote, Zionist answer to Palestinian terrorism. This move came under a lot of condemnations, which I'll report about in the political section below. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon. After the escalations of the last several days, today there was continued fire between the sides, however, relative calm by comparison to what we've seen in the last week. A Hezbollah suicide drone was intercepted near Metula, and anti-tank missiles were also fired towards the areas of Avivim. There were also several different border incidents reported throughout the day, however, no barrages of rockets or missiles like we've seen in the last several days. Regarding IDF activity, the IDF reported targeting Hezbollah military structures in the areas of Yarun and in Kafra village. Other fire was noted in the areas of Hamam, where the IDF stated that it fired to remove a threat from the border. In addition to this, El Miyadin reported IDF attacks in the town of Yater, and Al Manar also reported other attacks in Yarun as well. Other news related to the northern front of Israel, southern front of Lebanon. Hezbollah updated its report from yesterday after it stated that a family was killed in the IDF retaliation in the Hula village. Hezbollah published that the father and son who were killed, Hassan Ali Qasim Hussein and Ali Hassan Hussein, are both Hezbollah operatives. With these, Hezbollah announced that the number of operatives killed since the war began is 234. The IDF states that the number of Hezbollah operatives that have been killed since the war began is in fact much larger. I will add that it is quite rare that Hezbollah would have actually corrected its initial publication that a family was killed and stating actually they are Hezbollah members. It is possible that Hezbollah is trying to build more credit, showing that it is actually giving sacrifices, quote unquote, and losing operatives in the war, showing both the Lebanese people that this is not just IDF bombings, but Hezbollah is fighting in the borders, but more importantly, possibly showing Hamas that actually Hezbollah is suffering losses too, and therefore saving face for the fact that Hezbollah has not joined the war the way Hamas wants. Other news, Al-Akhbar reported today on the proposal that has been mentioned in the last several days that has been developed by the U.S. Special Envoy to the region, Amos Hochstein, stating that his aim now is to have a mechanism in place such that if a ceasefire is reached in Gaza, it can be immediately implemented in southern Lebanon. So in other words, while Hezbollah has said that they're willing to just halt the fire while a ceasefire is reached in Gaza, Israel said it's not going to do that, and there's a lot of concern that actually while a truce may be developed if hostage negotiations do go forth in Gaza, there will be at that same time escalations in Lebanon. So Amos Hochstein is trying to have a mechanism in place so that if that truce does happen, they will be able to quote unquote flip the switch and turn on a truce and a de-escalation in Lebanon as well. According to the report in Al-Akhbar, the framework involves deploying Lebanese military across the border and no other armed forces in the area, and that after this is achieved, negotiations will commence on the border disputes between the countries. Importantly, Al-Akhbar, which is a Hezbollah affiliate, did not mention anything about Hezbollah being pulled up north in this plan. A few days ago, Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati said that he has been given a proposal by Amos Hochstein, and among others, it revolved around the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which calls for Hezbollah to be pulled up north. It is possible this is part of the internal politics in Lebanon that the Al-Akhbar is trying to tell the Lebanese government, you can go forth with this plan. We may be willing to have Lebanese soldiers along the border. However, Hezbollah is not going to even talk about the possibility of being pulled up north. Other news related to the northern front of Israel, and this time regarding Syria. 2 rockets were launched from Syria towards the central part of the Golan Heights today. Hours later, the Syrian Human Rights Observatory reported that the IDF carried out 2 missile attacks in the region between Naveh and Jassem in the Dara district. No information was given regarding casualties or what the targets were. Other reports suggested there may have been combined artillery fire and missile fire. However, again, there were no reports made regarding what was actually targeted. Moving on to some of the regional developments, the Houthis attacked a freight ship today called the True Confidence with nautical missiles in the Gulf of Aden. Fire broke out on deck, and according to reports, for the first time since the war began, the missile caused the death of 2 people on board, and the rest of the crew abandoned ship. The ship was reportedly sailing under the banners of Barbados. Houthi spokesperson Yahya Saria claimed responsibility for this attack, stating that an American ship was attacked after it ignored Houthi warnings to change course. It's important to note that the ship's company, nor the registration, appeared to have any affiliation with the United States. The ship was sailing from China towards Saudi Arabia. It is possible this was a mistaken identity of the Houthis, or that the Houthis attacked the ship and then tried to later claim that it belonged to the United States. However, what is important to note of this is that the crew's abandoned ship, the ship may sink, it was not reported what the ship was carrying, and at the same time, for the first time, the Houthis have caused death in their attacks in the Gulf of Aden. Relating to this, the U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller stated that the Houthis are killing innocent people while disrupting international trade, and called upon other governments to join the maritime coalition that is trying to secure the Gulf of Aden and the Bab el-Mandab Straits. Hours later, coalition attacks were also reported in the Hodeidah port. However, there was no reports made regarding how many attacks were carried out or what was targeted. Moving on to some of the political and general trends of the last 24 hours, Saudi Arabia heavily condemned the approval of almost 3,500 housing units in West Bank settlements. Amidst the United States' plans for normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel, the way the Saudi message was framed is important. The statement said that such moves stand in the way of realizing opportunities for peace and regional stability. One of the things that have happened in the last several months is that when the war broke out, the United States tried to suggest that Saudi Arabia may accept even just a de-escalation between Israel and Hamas and some sort of future plan for a Palestinian state. However, as the war went on, Saudi Arabia, quote-unquote, upped the ante and said they are only going to accept normalization if this comes amidst a concrete, irreversible plan for a Palestinian state. Now that Israel is approving more housing units in West Bank settlements, Saudi Arabia is saying this stands in the way of realizing opportunities for regional stability and peace. Other political news. South Africa appealed to the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, today with an urgent request for new injunctions to be leveled against Israel, saying that Israel is violating the current ones. South Africa asked the court to order the injunctions immediately without having a debate on the matter due to the worsening conditions of hunger that the country states are a result of Israel violating previous court rulings. I remind everyone that one of the court injunctions was that Israel needs to allow as much aid as possible to flow into the Gaza Strip. Other political news. Washington Post published today that while until now the United States has officially announced 2 weapons shipments to Israel since the war began, worth collectively about $250 million, there have in fact been over 100 shipments of weaponry, including thousands of bombs of different sizes, bunker-penetrating missiles, light weaponry, and other armaments and ammunition sent from the United States to Israel. Reportedly, this was exposed to Congress during a classified briefing, and these shipments did not require reporting to Congress at the time because they were far smaller in scale. The United States is only obligated to report to Congress of weapons shipments and weapons sales beyond a certain price. Other political news. Minister Gantz of Israel's war cabinet concluded his international tour today, visiting London after he was in D.C. He was scheduled to meet with the United Kingdom's Foreign Minister David Cameron and with the United Kingdom's National Security Advisor Tim Barrow, but in a surprise move, Rishi Sunak joined the meetings. Gantz's party reported that Minister Gantz expresses gratitude to the United Kingdom for its support and reiterated Israel's commitment to remove Hamas's threat and end Hamas regime in Gaza while abiding by international law. In turn, the British Foreign Office reported that David Cameron expressed to Minister Gantz the need to increase the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza, adding that there is not enough being done and no improvements are being seen on the ground level, and explicitly stating the United Kingdom is quickly losing its patience with the situation. In addition, Wall Street Journal reported today that in his meetings with the United States, Gantz emphasized Israel's intent to invade Rafah as well, stating that leaving Rafah untouched is tantamount to sending firemen to put out a fire, but having them only put out 80% of the fire. It was also reported that Gantz was surprised at the extent of objection he heard about the Rafah operation in the United States and that he tried to mitigate the situation. Possibly related to this, and what appears to be another escalation of diplomatic tone, Reuters reported today that the United States has drafted a Security Council resolution that will call for an immediate 6-week truce and the release of all hostages. Now, it's important to understand the significance of this. Unlike general calls for a truce, or even the United States applying pressure on Israel for a truce, if the UN Security Council accepts this resolution and Israel does not abide by it, this opens Israel up to international sanctions, which, if the United States is the one who put this resolution forth, it is also signaling it may not block. So that's a very different thing than votes of condemnation in the United Nations General Assembly, or the General Assembly voting for a ceasefire, or even Israel being criticized by the UN Security Council. It is very unlikely that the U.S. will put this forward in the UN Security Council without getting first Israel's approval, or at least consulting with Israel. However, the mere fact that it's being possibly circulated is the U.S. actually adding a level of threat and escalating the diplomatic war between the sides, saying, we might put this forward, you need to give us something, quote unquote, with regards to what the U.S. is demanding of Israel. In other news, Israel's foreign minister Israel-Hamas put out a tweet today calling upon female world leaders to make their voices heard in response to the UN report on sexual violence that occurred during October 7th. Israel's foreign minister Israel-Hamas has been trying to echo this more and more and to get international pressure to surround this UN report. It is also important to note that at the same time he has recalled Israel's UN ambassadors. It is unclear what exactly the international diplomatic strategic plan is. Moving on to the future of the Gaza Strip. Leading up to his meetings with Minister Gantz today, the UK Foreign Minister David Cameron stated in the House of Lords yesterday that Israel should not have veto power over recognition of a Palestinian state, adding that the United Kingdom should consider such recognition as part of momentum that will lead towards a two-state solution. It is possible that this is in coordination with the United States, which has also been saying that it's considering recognizing the Palestinian state. Again, if that happens, it will actually have substantial diplomatic implications for Israel. It's not just an empty recognition. It will mean that Israel will officially be recognized as occupying another country, and the negotiations between Israel and the PLO, or the Palestinian Authority, should these happen later, will be at a very different level, because the PLO or the Palestinian Authority will have this international recognition of a state of Palestine. At the same time, it will also mean that the state of Palestine has been recognized within specific borders that will then also possibly complicate negotiations or facilitate them, because there will already be this framework. If you enjoy these reports, please do remember to give them a like, subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to know when reports come out. If you have questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.